Hello, welcome to my channel and welcome to a new sketchbook tour. If you're new around here, then my name is Katie. I'm a full-time sketchbook artist and I work in mixed media. So if you've seen any of my sketchbook tours before, you'll know that I usually split them into two. So I usually do half and then half again, and that's generally because they'd be super long videos and also because it takes me quite a long time to film my sketchbooks. I don't work exclusively in one sketchbook. I tend to jump around into different ones depending on the mediums that I use. So this one here is generally for wetter mediums. So I have been using this when I use my kuretake and my watercolour style paintings. There is quite a lot of other media in here. There's also gouache, and I'll talk you through it as we go to each page. But I'm actually doing this in one go, so I'm not splitting it in half. This is a completely finished sketchbook and I'm really excited to share it with you today. So let's get on with showing you which sketchbook I'm using here. So this is the Gold Line Mixed Media Art Journal. It's by Claire Fontaine. It has one smooth side and one textured side. I talk a little bit more about the sketchbooks that I use in the video where I rank them, so I'll leave that linked up in the cards. The other thing that's a little bit different about this sketchbook is that it is square format. So usually I work portrait in sketchbooks like this. So this is my Royal Talons. This is generally my daily, everyday go-to. But I also really enjoy using a Strathmore, but that's also portrait. And this is the only one that I use that's square. And I wasn't sure if I'd like the format, but it turns out I really enjoyed it. I really loved working in this sketchbook. Okay, so let's start from the very beginning, which was back in 2023. And I got this sketchbook for my birthday. And then I got married, and then I went on my mini moon and we went to Shropshire and I took this with me. I also took my Kuretake Gansai Tambi watercolours, which was also something I got for my birthday. And so these were created with that, as well as some of my Neocolours and coloured pencils. This is the place that we stayed. I really love documenting trips and things in this way, so adding that typography was really fun to do. It's really interesting to see where I was at a couple of years ago. So I know that sometimes we can put pressure on ourselves to fill sketchbooks really, really quickly, or that we're not keeping up with other artists. But it's actually really nice to be able to see your progression. So don't worry if you've got something from ages and ages ago and then not touched it for ages, because it really does help see your growth. This one was one of the views just down the hill from where we were staying. And I really love the colours here, really vibrant. I did add in some brush pens here too. This was all swatched, and I filmed the process for this. So when I first got the Kuretake, I filmed a whole thing about how I was finding it and what I thought of the paints, as well as all these swatches. So again, I'll leave that linked in the cards. Usually in these sketchbooks tours, I have a lot of things to link. So if I run out of cards, they'll be down in the description box too. You can see it has got a little bit messy where things have transferred. Generally, I will use scraps of paper, so I get asked this a lot about trying to stop things from dirtying on the page, and usually I put these in between, and that really helps because it transfers onto the paper rather than the art, but sometimes I forget, and that's just the nature of sketchbooks. We walked past this field of sheep on a walk, and I don't draw sheep very often, but it was really nice to capture that memory. This was done with the Gansai Tambi as well. This was from a session with my friend TJ, again back in 2023, very different for me. So we have an African wild dog over here. This was done with gouache and coloured pencils. And then the Namib Desert, which was really fun to paint, again with gouache. That's generally my go-to. This might have been painted with the Kuretake actually, I recognise that blue. I was just trying to get used to it. It was fun to use these different colours as well. Okay, then we've skipped quite a few months here because this would have been in October when I was trying to work out my Christmas card design for 2023. I wanted something really bright and colourful, but this ended up feeling a bit too sort of Eastery. It felt too spring-like, even though I did try to put in a lot of snow here. I tried to make it colourful and still snowy, and it didn't quite work. So I scrapped this idea and then did this one, which I much preferred, and this was the design I went forward with. Tweaked it a little bit in Photoshop by making the sky a bit brighter and adding on stars. I'm really happy with this little black bird. So this is collaged on top. So just cut out from paper that I painted black, and I really, really love him. I think he worked out great. Some birds. So I really love painting nature, which you'll see as a theme throughout this sketchbook, but I've always loved birds. It's an interest from my dad, so he always used to quiz me on bird names and things, so I always think of them very fondly. And we've got a Bohemian waxwing here. I didn't quite get the shape of him right. He's not my best bird, but I prefer this robin, even though, again, he's not a perfect shape. He's a little bit plump, but he looks very happy. So this was painted in around December. So as you can see, I am coming back to this sketchbook every now and then, but it's not a consistent thing. Then I believe this was 2024 when I was... Yes, this was 2024 because I was doing a month all about line work on my Patreon. All of our sessions are recorded if you did want to go back and watch this, but we were just playing around with different mediums. Obviously I was focusing on outlines and I was using ink pens here, as well as a really old eyeliner brush which was slightly dried out, and I just loved the effect that gave. So you don't have to have like really fancy supplies to be experimenting and playing in your sketchbook. Got a gap here. This was actually painted and I scanned the stages because this was going to be a project in my book, but I actually decided not to go ahead with this one, so you won't see that in the book, and so I didn't finish it either. But I was playing around with an orange background, so having that tone on the bottom really added a nice amount of warmth to this, and it's something I really enjoy doing. Okay, and then a month after that on Patreon was about drawing from life. So I use a lot of references in my work, and I really wanted to try out observational drawing, and it's been one of my favourite months. It's definitely something I want to do again or do more of here in 2025 because I loved it. It was really nice to draw from life. It gives you so many more options, and it's really good for our skills as well to try that. So yes, this was in March 2024. I just drew my cup of tea and my breakfast. Just really fun, and I used a lot of watercolours this month, which is what I use for both of these. I'm going to keep saying watercolours. It is the Kuretake Gansai Tambi set, and this is just a really nice colourful spread. Those paints really allow me to be nice and loose, and you can see that like I'm really embracing the wet on wet blending and the way the colours are merging in together, but I'm okay with that. I really love the looseness it brings to my work. Then I dropped some pegs on the floor, and because it was observational month, I left them there, and then I came and I sat on the floor and I painted them. So it's a very different topic for me, and that came from observational, like drawing from life month. So really nice to push myself, and I actually really like how these pegs turned out. I can see some of the blending from adding all the water on and seeing the paints merge. So it's very loose and messy, but I think this is actually quite effective. This is drawing my art supplies. Again, this was for Drawing from Life Month as part of our Patreon live stream. I also did draw my art materials in our recent live session. So as part of my 30 days of sketchbook joy, which is still ongoing. If you wanted to join us, it's not too late to join in. And we've got some live streams this month, which are also available for replay. So head to the live tab on my channel if you want to see me draw some more art supplies. But this was way back last year. It's just something really comforting about drawing them, and it's something that we'll all have that we can draw from, and it's nice to document them as well. Then this was Mother's Day, so went to visit my parents, and my mum had got this beautiful bouquet, so I painted that. And it's not often I take my art supplies out of the house with me, unless I'm specifically going on location and doing plein air. So it's quite different for me to take it to my parents, but I remember just painting this whilst having a chat with them, and it was really nice to be able to create whilst still being involved with everything around me, and I think they're used to me wanting to paint all the time now, and it's something I want to do more of, as I've mentioned. So here I've used some acrylic markers, coloured pencils, and also some brush pens, so I know this is a Tombow as well. Really like how this square spread works as well, because I can still go over the middle and fill it out nicely. So I was really enjoying this sketchbook during that month, so I pretty much did most of my observational drawing in here. So we've got some of my pencil pots here over on the left. Again, playing around with the Kuretake, but there's also a lot of coloured pencils on here, just to try and get some of those details. And some food packaging. Again, that was another prompt that is in our 30 Days of Sketchbook Joy. It's really fun to push ourselves with different subjects like this, and yeah, I really surprised myself by how much I enjoyed it. This was painted for a Patreon tutorial where I was talking about how to paint trees and bushes in the distance. So I did this plein air in Mortis font, which is local to me, and just sat in the field and filmed it, and then did a voiceover for my patrons with the exact techniques. So over here on the left we've got brush pens and Neocolor 2, and here on the right I was using my gouache palette. So you can definitely see a difference there. There's a lot more texture and blending over here on the right, where it sort of merges together, but I really like how they sit together. some more observational drawing. This was more of a visual diary page, so this was actually when I was working on my book, which was a secret at the time, and I was doing my colour wheels then. And then there's just like some mundane stuff about my car and dinner, but it was nice to document my day in this way. It's something that maybe I would like to do again. I love the idea of doing it every day, but it's certainly not feasible with the amount of stuff I've got on at the moment. But it's nice to be able to look back and see it in this way. And then over here we've just got another morning routine where I was having my breakfast and doing some journaling in my Hobonichi notebook. This one I definitely did paint here on YouTube, so the process for this one is on my channel. Again, I'll link it down below, but this was started with the Kuretake paints, and then I went on with some gouache. So this yellow, because I wanted it to be quite opaque and thick, I just used gouache for those flowers. And finished off this sheep or mountain goat maybe with coloured pencils. Often when I get flowers, I love to paint them, so whenever Mitch buys me a bouquet, I always like to sort of immortalise them in my sketchbook whilst they're nice and fresh. So this is from one of those flowers. I think this was in July, so for my birthday. Some gorgeous sunflowers, roses, some other flowers I don't know the name of, but I really love the colours here. This was actually painted as well. This was part of my week of art, so I will leave that too because I love that video, and it was really nice to come back to painting from life from when I was doing it in March to doing it here in July. Then I went to Winchester with my sister, brother-in-law and my husband, so we are still in July here. I used gouache mostly and then some coloured pencils on top. Those are definitely my comfort mediums, I use those a lot. And then I used my Sailor Fude de Manin fountain pen for the text. And I didn't outline everything, but I did use it just for the writing, just to add more sort of journal-like diary effects to this page. Again, really helps me, when I do create art, it helps me to remember the day better, and just adding these notes, it makes it really nice to reflect and look back on. This was from the same, maybe this was from the week in the life, I'm not sure, but this one definitely was because it was our first wedding anniversary, so we went back to the place we got married and I painted this from our room. So this was the view outside, and you can see clips of this in that video. This was done way in advance, so this was actually when I was closer to the end of the book, but I had this blank spread and I had filmed swatching my set over here, so my new 48 set of Kuretake paints, and it hadn't filmed, so I had to do it again. So that's why this is here, and I was just filling up a blank page. This was from that same week, so the creating I was doing for that week of art, and this was done at XB Gardens, so plein air, just sat on a bench with this wonderful tree in front of me. As soon as I saw it, I knew I wanted to paint it. I used a bit of mixed media here, so mostly Kuretake, some dough and ink tenters on here as well, and some Neocolors, and then some coloured pencils. This is the only time in this sketchbook where I was working in it in a portrait way, so that was really fun to do, even though it makes it difficult for sketchbook tours. This was the last day of the week of art where I was drawing from observation. So we'd gone to this little cafe and I did sketch this whilst I was there, but then I came home and I finished it off. So I wasn't quite brave enough to take my paints with me to the cafe, but I was okay to take just a pencil, my pencil roll and my sketchbook. And I really like how this turned out. I do really enjoy drawing like coffee cups and food, so that's something that we're going to be doing on Patreon next month. Our theme is food and drink, so I'm looking forward to doing that. Over here we've got some fish. I think this was from a River Life month over on Patreon. I love drawing fish. I know that some people aren't fans, but for me, I don't know what it is, but I just think they're really fun. I feel like you can really capture their personalities. This was from Botanical Month on Patreon, so this is in November now, so we skipped ahead again. Sometimes I put this sketchbook down for ages, and sometimes I'll be using it all of the time. You can see how messy this is, and this is when I was testing out using the Derwent grater. So this is part of a live stream on my Patreon, and I didn't seal it, and that was a mistake, but it is what it is. I'm okay if sketchbooks get messy and dirty. Created this really interesting texture, and I was just playing around. You can see I was trying to be super loose with my Kuretake paints, and playful on top as well with, I think this is dough and ink tint, so I can see the texture there from some line work. And then in November, so November was our botanical month, and I filmed a tutorial for how to paint flower meadows. So this one here is with the Kuretake paints. You'll see I use that a lot in this sketchbook, and that's because they work great in this sketchbook. So although I use a lot of gouache and other mediums, generally I'll use them in other sketchbooks, but Kuretake feels like it's reserved for these mixed media ones, so this Clairefontaine and also the Strathmore. So I really like how this turned out. This was a technique that I taught my patrons, so I'm not going to talk too much about that, but I love the effect and the sense of distance. Then over here we did brush pens. So again, I really like showing different techniques with different mediums, especially as a mixed media artist. So we've got daisies over here, and then I have finished the tutorial, and then I decided to fill the middle with this lovely poppy, which turned out great. I got a few questions about that, so that links in with another page I'll show you in a moment. So as part of that botanical month, I was exploring doing it in 2 different ways. So taking the same subject and the same reference and doing it differently. So over here on the left was with my watercolours, and here on the right is with all acrylics. On both of them I finished them off with coloured pencils, but it's really interesting to see how our paints and our mediums can affect the way that we create, because the style and the layout is the exact same, but it's very different vibes. So I don't think there's one I prefer more than the other. I think it changes depending on how I'm feeling that day, because I really like the looseness over here and the white space, whereas over here I put down a base layer of beige and then I worked on top. But I prefer the contrast with the darker background here that I did with the acrylics. So they each have their own merits, and that's why I'm not a specific one medium artist, because I could never decide, and I just love using different things and seeing my style change. Okay, so this links in with the poppy. So when I shared this one, someone asked about not just doing meadows, but also how to do individual stems of flowers. So I filmed a quick tutorial, again using my Kuretake paints for these ones, so you can see how loose they are. But a lot of it is using your brush, so that's a little tutorial that's on my Patreon. And then here I had another empty page. If you've seen my other sketchbook tours, you'll know that sometimes I struggle to go back and fill spreads. But I did for this one because it was actually the very last page, and you'll have seen this in last week's video where I was testing out and comparing different watercolour pencils. This is from the Kuretake 48 set where I was testing them out. So this is the page that, this one I think is the page that didn't get caught on film, so I missed a whole chunk, so that's why I had to redo them in a page earlier on. But swatch pages are so satisfying, aren't they? I really love how this looks. I love the rainbow, and it's also really helpful just to look back on and to reference as well. So it's really nice. Not only is it cathartic to do swatches, so I really recommend getting to know your palettes by swatching them out first, because sometimes they do look very different in the pan than they do on the page, but it's also really nice to just look back onto. Then we've got this one. This was the first painting I did with my new 48 set. Really, really proud of this one. This was turned into a print for my Patreon, so I do exclusive prints each month. And I love this one. I'm really, really proud of it. Really like the different colours. So although I use most of the colours in that set, it still feels like it's not too much. I feel like it worked out quite well. And I love some of the effects here where I was using quite a lot of water on the page. In December on Patreon we did winter month, so I was definitely focusing on very snowy scenes. I was also doing my daily art, so that was, a lot of it was in this one, so you'll see that a lot of my drawings were very snowy and I'm using a lot of blues. And the daily art challenge is mostly in that oil challenge, but I did also wanted to test something out in this one by using my Kuretake paints. And I didn't finish it. I think I was planning on painting a bunny or something, or like an Arctic hare or something over here, but I didn't get around to it, so it's just stayed as it is because I've moved on. I need to be in the moment for drawing, and I don't tend to come back to finish things. So if I don't finish it in one sitting, it's very rare that I will come back to it. But I like some of the effects here. So I actually sprinkled salt on top, so you can see here where I've got that sort of snowflake. That's just from adding salt on top. So I really like that. It didn't work super well on the rest of the picture because I'd let it dry a little bit too much. So really with that, it has to be pretty wet for the salt to make these effects. But just that little area I feel like made this whole spread worth it because I really like the little snowflake there. And then you'll have seen this recently when I was testing out my new watercolours. So I've set up my very first professional watercolour palette. So I used to call the Kuretake watercolours, but I can really see the difference now. So I'm learning a lot about watercolour, and 2025 is definitely going to be the year for me to practice them. But here I was just swatching them, seeing out all the different colours. As I said, it can look very different on the page than in the tube, and I found that definitely was the case with some of these. But again, it's helpful to see how they work and to test out the different waters. So I started quite opaque and then added water as we went. But as I say all the time, it's really handy to experiment and test your mediums before you go and use them as well, and to just keep experimenting as you go. This was from the same video, so I was doing some techniques here from a Skillshare class I was taking, and then this fern is from another Skillshare class, and I finished it with some more nature studies. So if you want to see the process for this one, that is in that video. But I like how it sits, so I really like the style here. This does feel a little bit different for me, but I really enjoyed painting it. This is from the watercolour pencil video that went live last week, so you can see that there, but lots of swatching again and seeing how they compare with the different types. And then I generally do use the back of my sketchbook for swatching, so whenever I'm doing videos I tend to go to the back of my book and I work with more finished works at the front and work through that way, and then they will meet eventually. But this is from when I did an art haul, so these are some green watercolours that my friend Jodie sent me, and this is from a small business. So again, I'll leave that linked because she sent me some lovely homemade watercolours there. And this is also from that same Kuretake video where I missed our entire row of blues, so I had to pop them there. And then that's it. So this last one was when, just after I'd gone to Japan, I think, and bought a few more individual pans of the Kuretake, and I just wanted to swatch those for a video, so that's what this is. And I also got a couple of pan pastels, so they're there too. And that's everything for this sketchbook. So that was definitely a whistle-stop tour, but I hope you've enjoyed seeing it. There's a huge range of subjects and topics in here, as well as different mediums, but as you can see, I definitely do use my Kuretake quite a lot in here. And it's really fun to see from 2023 all the way through to 2025, although I definitely did a lot more swatching rather than actual art in this one towards the end. Still really nice to see, and as I say, it's really nice to... I love sketchbooks because you can look back on them and relive a lot of memories, and this one is definitely special for a lot of these pages. So I hope you enjoyed watching. A huge thank you to my patrons for their support in allowing me to create these free YouTube videos every week. Sketchbook Joy is ongoing, so 30 Days of Sketchbook Joy is a current daily art challenge I'm doing ahead of my book launch, which is coming up very, very quickly on the 6th of March. So I'll leave a link to pre-order down below if you haven't already. But thank you for your support, and I will see you next Sunday in a new YouTube video. See you later!